MG Rob back with you, and today we're back on the II Fastback again. So let's get going. So in the last video I covered all this with cardboard and found that we had a flat spot in here and this was too low and I need to bring the corner of this up to get all this to look right. So I decided to start with putting these ribs back on here again with the idea of adjusting this rib a little bit so I can hold this, so I can keep this in position while I rework all this stuff. But I found out that the amount that I need to raise this up to get it where I want it is actually putting it right against this again. So somewhere I made a mistake here when I was putting all this together, between taking this off and getting this together, or when I welded on it, something moved and it pulled down on me. So now what I need to do is take a few minutes here and try to take a bunch of measurements. Try to just figure out, did the other side move as well? Because right now that's up against there like it should be. So did just this side move or did both sides move? So is it symmetrical? So I'm going to spend some time doing that off camera and thinking about it, and then we'll get back to it. So after taking a series of measurements, it looks to me like something moved just on this side only, probably while I was welding it, and it pulled down on me. So all my measurements are showing that with this pulled up, it's symmetrical on both sides. So now I just need to figure out how I'm going to adjust this piece of inner structure. I've already got this cut loose here, so I can get that out of the way. And then I got to adjust this, but if you'll remember in the last video, I actually got a little ahead of myself and spot welded these plates in here. I shouldn't have done that yet, because now I can't just buzz this here and here and take it out and adjust it and put it back in. So it's probably going to involve me cutting it somewhere in here, pulling it back up to where I'm wanting it, and then re-welding it. But I got to think about that a little bit. And once I get this back up into place, then I got to test fit this and probably adjust the shape of the very end a little bit, then put it back in. Then I'm back where I was and can start moving forward again. So in the end, I decided the best way to fix it was to just go ahead and cut it, get it back where I wanted it, and re-weld it back together. Because I actually ended up building a small gap there, so I couldn't just go straight across it. But now I'll let this thing cool, pull the clecos out and see if it stayed where I want it, and then I can adjust this. So it looks like this has stayed where I want it, or at least just so close to where I want it, it's not worth trying to do any more cutting or anything. It's, you know. So now this doesn't curve up into here nearly as nice anymore. It has a bit of a kink in it now, but all this will get covered up with, you know, interior pieces in the end anyway. And I wanted to keep the cuts here right in line with where this goes, because I'll likely put a tie plate across here like I did down here, and I wanted my cut line to be where that tie plate is so everything stays nice and strong. So now I just need to take this, go over to the vise and just take a slight bit of this curve out right here so that it lands here like it's supposed to, then this can go back in. All right, I flatten this back out a little bit. It's all fitting. And as my drill sergeant in basic used to say, we're cooking with Crisco now. So I can go ahead and tack this thing back in place and start working on figuring out how the other window, and making another one of these for the other side, and then figuring out how this is going to actually be put in place and how the inner structure is going to be made to hold it all. So after standing here for far too long, trying to figure out exactly how I want to work the inner structure around the window to be able to hold it in place. I have decided to just kind of put that aside for the moment and start looking at the packing tray and how I'm going to end the packing tray here. Because I think I'm going to have to, whatever I do I'm going to have to work both of those together to get a bottom piece in place here. So I'm going to switch to working on this for the moment. I'm going to make some marks where I'm going to bend this and trim this up and start figuring out this bottom portion and how I'm going to integrate that and the bottom piece of the inner structure of this together. So it's the way it goes building cars. Sometimes you get stuck on something, or sometimes you got to do something else first, but I think it's a lot easier to work on this with this open, plus I still have to weld this panel out, so yeah, I better start working on some of that stuff. So I've been starting to work out some of the inner structure around this window, and I ended up getting this piece in here, which actually ties back into the packing shelf here, and I think that's going to work out pretty well for me. But the next thing I want to do is I want to get this tied into the top somehow, and I need it to tie in right here because this is where the latch is, and I need it to incorporate the latch. Now the thing with this says, see, it's got 3 screws in it, but this has a real curve to it here. So whatever I do here, I got to have that in order to be able to properly screw that in. And I got a way we're going to do that. And I'll show you that here in a second. But before we start on that, see how I got this coming down here, and then it goes to a little flat. I think that's going to work out actually pretty well. And I got the pattern from doing this side. I should be able to just take it to that side and hopefully it'll fit. Probably take some minor adjustments because, you know, nothing on these cars is exactly the same side to side. It's just close. All right, so this is how we're going to do this. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be good enough for this because, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect because you're not going to see it that well at all. This is going to cover that up. So what we do, find a ball peen hammer that the radius here is pretty close to this, preferably a hair smaller, which this one isn't quite, but it'll do for what I'm doing here. It's almost a perfect match. Now, a good way to do this would be, let me put this out of the way. Good way to do this is that if you have a nice big heavy chunk of steel with a slot in it, that's the exact width you want and the length you want that's in there to do it with. I don't have a piece, so the next best way to do it is in the vise. I've already got this thing pre-marked to the length I want and the width I'm looking for so that I can know where to start and stop and line it up here. So you get to vise to the width you want. Now I found out for what I'm doing, I want a little over 9/16. In order to get that, I need this to hold this, because if I let it go any further, it'll be too small of an opening. If you flip it around anymore, it's too wide of an opening. Now you want your hammer to be smooth. When I picked this up, there was a old bit of weld BB here, and that all will transfer into the metal. So I hit it with a file, cleaned it off, and then you should look at the edges of your vise here too. You want it to be, the smoother it is, the better this is going to come out, because any imperfections will transfer into the metal. But I'm basically just going to hold it here, and now it's best to clamp it down, but I'm not going to clamp it down here because then the clamps get in the way of the hammer. We basically just start hammering it. I know where I'm going to start and where I'm going to stop. We just start hammering across and easing it into where we want it. And then stop, flip it over, and just keep doing that until you get this fully into there and relatively smooth. And the slower you go at it, the lighter the hits you do, the smoother it's going to be in the end. And then you can come back in here and dress up the edges. And once you get it all where you want it, then you can open the vise up and you can work this edge here to get that edge nice and round the way you actually want it. And you can use this for like large bead rolls or for strengthening ribs and any little thing, as long as you're not worrying about this being super smooth and perfect. So this should fit into here reasonably well. And I can go, like I said, I think I need to go a little bit further with it. And we just keep working it till that fits really nice. And then I can make my bracket in there out of this where the screws can go in there and hold it. All right, so here's what I've got. This thing now fits this reasonably well, actually pretty darn close now. And that's what the finished product looks like. So you don't always necessarily need super fancy tools to do things like this. A little bit of creativity and patience can actually go a long way to doing some specialized things like this. And I got a lot of marks in here because my vise isn't very smooth. But if I really wanted this thing to look nice, you know, I could come at it with a little right angle grinder and a little sanding pad and really dress this up a lot. And with a couple coats of primer, you could actually make this thing look pretty good on a finished surface. So today is Friday, July 21st, and we're going to be at the Arthritis Foundation car show tomorrow, and we're going to go ahead and take this and the Green Phoenix both. So she's in getting the Green Phoenix seats put back together, and I'm out here cleaning this thing up. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a lot of these clecos out and putting pop rivets in place temporarily. And then this thing had no seat or anything in it, so I whipped up something real quick here. Made myself a nice deluxe seat here. Got an MGA seat back, what I believe is an early MGB lower frame and some OSB. Yay, winning. Now I did go ahead and make this thing a little bit less redneck because I actually put the ignition switch in the dashboard and extended the wires out so it's not just laying on the cowl anymore. But I did not get a fuel pump put together, so we have no tank. Because I got to rebuild the sending unit and the tank to try to get power to go through it before I even order a pump for it. And if I can't get power to go through it, then there's no sense ordering a pump, and I got to come up with a plan B. So we're going to be going back to what we did at the first car show and just put that lawnmower gas tank on here, or what I like to call my redneck fuel system. And it's still going to end up with just the battery sitting over here like it was before, which isn't ideal, but hey, it's the best I can do at the moment.